Hi teachers, my name is Bradley Davis and I'm a graduate student at Miami University studying school psychology. Before I start, I want to thank you all for coming out and taking time out of your day to listen to me speak. So, today I'm going to be talking about LGBTQ support services within schools and the impact that they can make when implemented. I'm also going to discuss free, let me repeat, FREE, free solutions that can be started in your school today and that can really create a greater sense of belonging for each student. So, I'm sure you're wondering, what are the learning objectives today? Well, the learning objectives today are that we can take the information that I'm covering today and implement the strategies that can offer the greatest support to the LGBTQ community, as well as take note of the statistics that are common when these support services are not implemented. So to start, I want to explain the LGBTQ acronym. When looking at lesbian, gay, and bisexual, this is referring to physical or romantic and/or emotional attraction to members of the same or opposite sex, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, and heterosexual. When considering transgender, this umbrella term is for people whose gender identity and/or gender expression doesn't necessarily typically associate with the sex that they are assigned to at birth. And lastly, for queer, this is an adjective used by some people where sexual orientation is not exclusively heterosexual. It is similar to bisexual, but is used in a more broader term. So, moving forward with our learning objectives, we're going to start by covering some statistics of LGBTQ students within schools today. When looking at a national survey in 2011 that covered around 8,500 LGBT students aging from 13 to 20, 85% of them reported hearing gay in a negative way, 57% heard homophobic remarks from teachers or other school staff, 82% responding students had been verbally harassed because of their sexual orientation in the past year, and unfortunately almost 64% of these students felt unsafe because of their sexual orientation. So when considering the outcomes that these statistics can lead to, we're going to look at higher rates of dropping out of school, have higher absenteeism, have lower post-secondary education aspirations, have higher levels of depression and anxiety, and unfortunately have lower self-esteem. Although other studies have looked at when schools have implemented an LGBTQ plus affirming student group such as the Gay Straight Alliance Club and the outcomes that these groups or clubs can offer. When implemented, these students reported feeling more connected with their school community and reported better mental health and mental health outcomes. These LGBTQ students within schools that had the anti-bullying policies that included sexual orientation and/or gender identity also reported hearing lower rates of victimization and harassment, as well as more effective and supportive staff and greater feelings of safety and belongingness in school. Now, since we are all teachers and working in schools in Ohio, I thought it would be best to look at a snapshot of the statistics that were reported from Ohio, specifically looking at the LGBTQ community. So, this was done in 2015, and the figures represent different categories that were looked at within the research. So, this first category is looking at the hearing of anti-LGBT remarks from students in Ohio schools, and unfortunately, it pretty much shadows what I covered previously, where 95% used gay in a negative way, 87 had homophobic remarks, it keeps going with 87% of negative remarks about gender expression. Looking at figure 2, this is looking at identity-based harassment and assault in Ohio schools, so something that is even more serious. And when we're looking at sexual orientation, verbal harassment was at 77%, while physical harassment was at 30%, so almost a third basically. Figure 3, showing discrimination against LGBTQ students in Ohio schools. The highest percentage was expressing PDA in school at 36%, moving forward with using the bathroom or locker room that aligns with genders, And on the second page with figure 4, this is looking at the availability of LGBT related resources and supports in Ohio schools. So this graph could be one of the most important ones, and it was showing that at least 97% of the schools in Ohio had at least one supportive educator. Now, I know that's not really asking for a lot, but at least 97% has one. Unfortunately, only 43% had a Gay Straight Alliance Club, which I mentioned earlier that had very positive outcomes within the research. The recommendation from this Ohio snapshot includes implementing comprehensive anti-bullying harassment policies and supporting gay straight alliances, as well as providing professional development for school staff on LGBTQ student services. So moving forward on to the research of school-age LGBTQ students, a distressingly high number of students reported hearing verbal and physical harassment, assault, and discrimination based on their sexual orientation and or gender identity. Other research has shown that LGBTQ students who are in schools with anti-bullying policies that include sexual orientation and or gender identity in the protected categories also endorse a more positive school climate and better school experiences. Such students report lower rates of victimization and harassment, as well as more effective and supportive staff and a greater feeling of safety and belongingness in schools. So now that I have covered the statistics of the LGBTQ community within schools today, I would like to cover what we can actually do for these students. The learning objective is how can we actually provide support strategies within schools and offer a greater sense of community for these students. So before we start, I want to show a frequency of school victimization over time. Now this study was looking at sexual orientation as well as gender expression, and it's showing that since 2001, sexual orientation and gender expression have been on a decline in regards to the verbal harassment, and physical assault in each category. When moving forward, we're also going to look at the LGBTQ resources over time. Now this is looking at supportive teaching and staff, GSA, which is a Gay Straight Alliance Club, positive inclusion of LGBTQ issues in curriculum, and a comprehensive anti-bullying policy. Now looking at each of these, they are all increasing, especially the supportive teaching strategies as well as the Gay Straight Alliance. These two are around 50 and almost 60% within schools over time, which is pretty impressive, as well as looking at the downward slope of the verbal harassment, and physical assault, which is very important. So now the part that you've all been waiting for. What are these free support strategies that can be implemented within schools to actually make a difference? So before I start, I just want to mention a tip from Glisten, which is where I've been getting these graphs from, is spelled glsen.org, and they mention the 4 pillars of implementing support strategies for LGBTQ students is having visible and supportive educators, being inclusive and allowing affirming policies, inclusive and curriculum resources, and student clubs that support LGBTQ students such as GSA. So when looking at these different resources, which I will have available to you after this presentation, I also just want to mention how important it is to be a visible and supportive ally to these LGBTQ students, as well as ensuring access to comprehensive sexuality education, and of course, supporting your school's Gay Straight Alliance Club. So when moving forward, we're going to look at how we can actually implement these support services. First, we're going to start with the GSA Gay Straight Alliance Club. Luckily enough, I offer 10 easy steps to start an easy and quick Gay Straight Alliance Club within your school. Second, we're also going to mention how important it is to be visible and supportive ally to these LGBTQ students to ensure access to comprehensive sexuality education and to implement comprehensive LGBTQ inclusive policies. I also included other resources that I found really beneficial when looking up this information for this presentation that I'll include after. Other services include just confidential and sensitive counseling. We want to make sure that health services and information address concerns of LGBT youth, as well as expand the sex ed curriculum to include LGBT issues beyond just HIV and AIDS. We want to include these topics in class, such as the history of LGBT civil rights and even LGBT authors within English class. In conclusion, I hope that you can take the support strategies I offer today and implement them within your schools, as well as take the resources I offered and show them to your colleagues to show that these strategies can really help the support of the LGBTQ community. As you can tell, there has been progress within the LGBTQ community overall and within schools, but there's still so much room to be made. As educators, we need to show these students that school is a safe place and that we truly do accept any student from any community, and that these students shouldn't be worried about being harassed or victimized within schools regardless of their gender or sexual identity. Thank you for listening. I hope you had a great time.